Hi sewing friends, welcome to my sewing room. My name is Beth and today I am going to quilt a quilt that I recently put together. There's a video that I will list in the description box that if you can go back and watch me put this one together. Lots of happy scraps for a baby, and today I'll be quilting it using two different quilting designs. I'll quilt in the squares and then I will quilt a different design in that white sashing around all the squares. First, I put my quilt sandwich together using 505 spray. I spray batting on half the quilt and I tried to smooth the quilt top nice and smooth over the top of that batting, and then I did the other half. I just use a long table and spray the batting, not too heavily, and then I smooth that quilt top down, try to get all the bumps and bubbles out of the quilt top. I did the same thing on the back. I turned the quilt upside down on my table and I cut some backing fabric that was just a little bit bigger than my quilt itself, and an inch or two bigger all the way around, which helps. Then I sprayed the back side of that batting and smoothed out the backing. So I'm going to start quilting my quilt somewhere in the middle. I chose one of the quilt blocks, these patchwork blocks. They're kind of improvisational log cabin. I started in the middle, if you look back at the video, and I just worked around a small square. So I'm kind of doing the same thing with the quilting lines, starting in the middle and sewing sort of a square and then just getting bigger and bigger as I go out, as I move out in this quilted patchwork quilt. So when I get done with this first patchwork square, I will stop and I'll move to another one of those squares, and I'll just kind of follow the seams, but I'm not sewing right on top of a seam. And I'm about, I don't know, an inch and a half away from each seam, is kind of an inch and a half away from the other, or an inch. It's they're not all the same. Since every square is different, all of these seams are slightly different. And I'm not getting my lines perfectly straight. That is, I am not a perfectionist, and I know that some of these lines are a little wobbly, and if you look at the whole quilt, you really don't notice that maybe there was a wobble here or there. And it's a baby quilt, so I'm going to take the stress off and just do my lines, and then when I get done with all of my squares, I'm going to work on that white sashing. I think in this little shot here you can kind of see my lines in all of those patchwork squares. And next up I'm going to work on the white sashing. And I used white thread throughout. I could have had maybe a light blue or yellow thread in those squares, but I just decided to go with white. And then in all of the white sashing areas, I am doing what I call loop-de-loops, just curvy lines with little loops. Now when you are quilting a quilt, there is one thing that always happens: you run out of bobbin thread. So you can either wind a few bobbins ready to go, or pause like I do. Every time it runs out, I just fill it up. It's kind of a nuisance when it happens right in the middle of one of your stitches, but get used to it, because that is something that always happens. After I got my quilt all quilted, I trimmed the layers, the backing and the batting, just following the edge of my quilt top, getting it all ready for binding. I found this fun striped fabric that I think goes pretty well with the front and the back. So I'll be cutting my binding strips 2.5 inches. I'll be joining them together and then pressing them in half. So I took my binding and I attached it to the back of the quilt. I have a few videos on how to attach binding. This is the way I like to do it for quilts that will be used a lot, and I hope it will be used a lot. I attach it to the back, roll it to the front, and just top stitch. There's no hand stitching with this particular binding. Of course, you could do that if you like. After I got it all stitched on there, my quilt is ready to give away, and I think this is a really fun, pretty quilt. Too bad it's not bigger, or I might be tempted to keep this one. Thank you for joining me today. I enjoy sewing with you, and I will see you next time.